Well, good morning. I see the early crowd is up and at 'em today. Vince, you've got your green IB T-shirt on. I've got I keep forgetting to get mine out of the drawer, and it's in this drawer that's right over here by me. I need to make sure maybe
Within
next
arm's
week that I
length.
pull that out. Yeah. Well, glad to have you with us here today. It is Notre Dame and North Carolina today.
Ooh.
IB Nation countdown to kickoff, and the bye week came quickly this year. Just 4 games. This is as early as I can remember a bye week in a while.
And I do love the bye week. I'm not going to lie to you, because I enjoy, of course I enjoy covering Notre Dame. It's my favorite thing to do as part of the year. But it's also nice to have a week where we don't have a Notre Dame game to watch, and you can kind of take
for
in
a little bit. Yeah.
You can take in the rest of college football, because we can kind of peruse like the noon game today, but then we got to start getting ready for Notre Dame, more so in a home game, I would say. But then we kind of miss out on the night game because we're doing a post game show and you're writing and all of those different things, and so it pretty much takes up the whole day. Again, not complaining, but when we don't have a Notre Dame game to do, it's kind of fun to take everything else in and maybe catch one of my son's games, things of that nature. So I do enjoy the bye week, and, gives us a chance to recuperate just like the players, get our second win,
That's
so
right.
It's good. It's good. But we got a game today, which I'm super fired up about, because we might be able to see some points scored today.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that. It's, that's going to be a good question. I've been posting some of these questions. Stymie, Desmond Howard makes me ill. I mean, that's like,
That's fair.
Yeah, that's very fair.
It's fair. I mean, it's amazing. He's basically a talking head that doesn't say anything, and what he says sounds like it was not thought out at all.
That's right.
So, but hey, good kudos to him for making all kinds of money saying a bunch of stupid stuff on national television. But it's even if he wasn't a Michigan guy, he would make me ill, and that just adds to it.
Robbie Presley down in Tuscaloosa, heard from him last night after the Mishawaka football game as they won a big local battle here in town last night. Justin Fisher, I talked to his dad, the preferred walk-on at Notre Dame, and he kind of gave me some little, this and that's. And, since this is a road game this weekend, the walk-ons obviously don't get to go. So he's got to go see his girlfriend over at Purdue, I guess, this weekend. So then he's got to get back into, because they've got practice Sunday, and they're not, because we were just talking about the bye week. They're not taking much time off. They're going right into this bye week. And Marcus Freeman was saying the other day, we're not taking time off. I thought maybe they might take Sunday off, since it's a bye week, but they're not. They're coming back. They've still got practice Sunday, and they'll, as Marcus Freeman said, they've got a lot of room to improve still. So I'm glad that they're not taking time off. They obviously won't have a game on Saturday, so they'll kind of from the wear and tear physical aspect, I guess they'll get a little time off next week. But they're going to be going 2 full weeks of practice leading up to BYU, after today.
Well, and we talk about us taking a reset, right? There's a lot of reset that needs to happen for this Notre Dame team as well. And, we talked about the fact that maybe they were too hard in the fall and, all of these different things. The fact that we're happy that they're practicing doesn't mean that they're going to be cracking heads the whole time. It just means
there's a lot of things you can still get better on.
Absolutely. Film, you can, walkthroughs, all of these different things, lining up correctly. That would be great, right away, so that you're not snapping the ball while somebody's still getting set. Just saying. But there's a lot of things that you can do at practice without taking days off, right? That they need. I mean, this is not a well-oiled machine at Notre Dame just yet. And I think we're a long ways away from being a well-oiled machine when we're talking about Notre Dame. So they need the practice. They do. I don't want to say they don't deserve days off, but they need to work. They need to put in the work. And I have no problem with that.
I just think that there are a lot of things that you can hone. I was going to say fine tune, but it's more than fine tuning right now. There are a lot of things that you can just what you said, between film and, little technical things, all those little details that we were
Yeah.
hearing so much about during training camp, you can work on those things during the bye week. It doesn't necessarily have to be BYU prep. I think that, this week, the week between now and next Saturday should probably be about, okay, what are specific things we need to do to get us better? Some of those things you were just talking about. And then obviously, once you roll around a week from today and start rolling toward BYU, that's more about BYU prep.
Absolutely. So. Yep. This is so. And if I'm following you correctly, and I agree with you, the first week is more like self-scout. You need to figure out what you're not doing well, what you are doing well, and you need to fine tune, like you said. They need to figure it out, and they need to. If it means shrinking the playbook, offensively, defensively, whatever, then that's what you do. If it means kind of going down a different route of the playbook that you haven't really dove into yet, that's what you do. But it's all about self-scouting. It's about you.
Yes.
And then the following week, of course, is going to be about BYU and that road trip to Vegas.
That's exactly right. And that is the next game, believe it or not. This is
nuts. That's nuts.
I know. And you talk about a 1-2 punch. North Carolina in that offense today, which we're going to get to here in a little bit. And then BYU, which has been pretty solid all the way around. I was surprised the egg that they laid last week against Oregon, but it was a pretty big egg after a pretty good win over Baylor the week before. But BYU's got a tough schedule. Like if you look through their schedule, I mean, they're playing some teams this year. I wonder how many paycheck games they're getting for, they're an independent, obviously, but I wonder if they get some paycheck games for some of those when they go on the road.
Well, you figure when these schedules were made, it was years ago, right? And that's when you kind of negotiate the paycheck thing, right?
Yeah.
And BYU wasn't a juggernaut 10 years ago. I mean, they were BYU, they whatever. But when these games were scheduled, my guess is they were getting paid to go to some of these places. And it's very difficult to be up for every one of these games week after week after week. And when you're an independent like BYU and you don't have an affiliation with a conference like Notre Dame does, I mean, let's be honest, some of the ACC games for Notre Dame are easier than others. And then, of course, you have Navy. And I realize they laid an egg against Marshall, but I was going to say you don't have to get up every single week. BYU is a different conversation.
Maybe that was part of the problem. They didn't get up.
I know you're absolutely right. I've been going through this in my head. It didn't really come out right, but
I know what you're saying, though. I know, it goes back to kind of the old Notre Dame schedules pre-ACC arrangement when you had Michigan State, Purdue, Boston College sprinkled in there. Pittsburgh was still in there pretty regularly. And obviously USC and Stanford. I mean, that was a lot different looking schedule back in those days.
No question. So BYU has to get up every single week, and that's not an easy thing to do. And a lot of times it's on the road too, which I think is something that's important to understand as well. Yeah. So, I still think BYU is a really, really good team, and I think we're going to see that over the next couple of weeks. But their next big test is Notre Dame. I mean, I was surprised they laid as big of an egg as they did against Oregon. I will agree with that. I think I picked them to win. That didn't go over well. And now we see what they do over the next 2 weeks over some fairly, doable opponents. And then they've got Notre Dame in Vegas, and that'll be a big one for both teams.
Make sure to smash that like button while I'm thinking about it. Subscribe, rate, review, all that great stuff. It always helps us out. And we appreciate you. We appreciate everyone in the live YouTube chat. And of course, this podcast will be up on all the channels, the Blue Wire and Spotify and Apple and all that good stuff later on as well after the show. Well, Vince, Notre Dame's coming off their first win. Finally got win number 1. Marcus Freeman got his first win. What's the biggest thing we learned after that 24-17 win over Cal last week?
Well, I think we learned that, Notre Dame's got a new quarterback, and they're going to have to tailor a few things because they have a new quarterback. This is not the same quarterback as before, but he doesn't have the same skill set as the previous quarterback in Tyler Buchner. They're completely different guys. So we saw the offense look a little bit different. We saw a well-called game by Tommy Rees. Now they need to go out and execute. And I think that's the biggest thing. And from a positional standpoint, what I learned is that this offensive line has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
Because the defensive front for Cal is legit. I mean, they're not Clemson, right? They're not some of these other, but they are legit. There was some beef that had to be moved around. Mm-hmm. And they did a good job of it. They dominated the defensive front for Cal the vast majority of that game. And they need to continue to get better, but at least we saw steps in the right direction after the first 2 weeks where it was like, oh man, this is a shell of what I thought that the offensive line was going to be. And so they showed me that, hey, we take this seriously. We take it personally. Let's move forward. They still need to get a lot better. Don't get me wrong. They still need to get a lot better, but they did a good job against a quality defensive front opponent.
I agree. To me, the biggest thing was we finally saw both lines start to live up to their potential. Defensive line obviously really got after it, especially in the second half against Cal. Now, again, still some things they can clean up. Got to stop letting the quarterback, get out of the pocket and run 15, 20 yards downfield. And that's going to be a bigger issue today against a more mobile quarterback in Drake May. But, the disruption we saw from that defensive line is the kind of stuff that we were expecting coming into the season. And then just what you said from the offensive line. Definitely played their best game, or I would say best half anyway, in the second half.
That's fair.
Against Cal. Started to play better toward the end of the first half, but definitely the second half. And we just need to see them continue that now. I still think the biggest thing for them is more between the ears than it is physical. It's just the communication and getting things right. They can be a really physical offensive line. And like, we started to see some of that, the way they were getting pushed off the line against that big Cal front last week.
Well, they were consistently moving the line of scrimmage in the direction that you would want Notre Dame to move the line of scrimmage, right? They weren't dealing with running backs getting hit in the backfield consistently. You weren't dealing with them running into the backs of offensive linemen. They were moving the line of scrimmage, and there were some short yardage opportunities that Notre Dame had, and they easily got them, where the running back would run into the back of the offensive line 4 yards down the field as opposed to 2 yards in the backfield. So that's huge. 4 yards of carry or whatever, that's fantastic. And again, I'm talking primarily in the second half, but that's when they decided to turn it on. And that showed that they have the ability, which I think we all knew at that point, but they showed that they can do it and they can start working as a group and they can be better and all of these different things. And I think that they hopefully started to shut down some of the talk of all the replacements that were needed on the offensive line. I think every week moving forward, we should see this offensive line getting better, the communication getting better, and 5 guys working together as one unit. And that's the most important thing. That's what you need, because they had a massive miscommunication on that first drive on that Mike Fire, and then it got way better as the game progressed.
Yep, I agree. I'm starring some of the comments that I'm seeing over there in the chat. We might not get to them right now, but we'll get to them here in a little bit. Drew Pyne, first career start, obviously a very shaky first half. He gets chewed out by Tommy Rees, plays better in the second half. He goes 7 of 12 for 57 yards in the first half. Did have the touchdown pass to Chris Tyree, had the fumbled snap. Obviously, he finished 17 of 23 for 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. They do not look like impressive numbers, and I think that unfortunately some of the bad stuff early on, probably even clouds what we saw from Drew Pyne in the second half. But he was 10 of 11 in the second half for 93 yards and a touchdown. Now, he obviously was not pushing the ball downfield, and again, that's something that we'll get to more here in a little bit. But just overall, I thought Drew Pyne played good enough, especially after the start. He can't start like that again today, especially against a much better offensive team like North Carolina. Can't start like that against anybody. But I think the hope is, okay, maybe he got some of those nerves out of his system there and he can kind of move forward from there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good call. And he can't start like that. And he'll be the first one to tell you that he had a horrible start. He's a guy that's going to take accountability for his play, and he had a horrible start. No two ways about it. And he talked about how he needs to be coached hard. Well, that's what he got. He got that from his offensive coordinator, and he got that from his head coach, and he turned it around. And hopefully, I don't know if they have to manufacture something and yell at him during pregame or something, but he needs to start better. Especially in a game like today where offensive points are going to matter. This offense for Notre Dame is going to have to score points, because no matter how good the defense for Notre Dame plays, they're going to give up points. This North Carolina team scores, right? So Notre Dame's going to have to match those scores, and at the end of the day, they're going to have more points on the board. I know that sounds very John Madden-like, but they're going to have to score more than North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that's going to come from the quarterback position. He's going to need to spread the ball around. I think the run game will be just fine. Obviously, they're going to lean on that as a crutch, but they're going to have to push the ball downfield. Like you said, we're going to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, Drew Pyne has to be better. He has to play a full game. We need second half Drew Pyne for the entire game. And if he can be that efficient, right, 10 of 11, that's really, really efficient. If he can be that efficient, score touchdowns instead of interceptions, then I think Notre Dame is going to be just fine. But I'm still a little bit worried about the production because in 3 games, the offense really hasn't produced points. And that's going to be the big deal for today.
It's funny. Anthony Solomon says, hopefully they don't have to yell at Drew Pyne to get him focused. And I mean, I was just envisioning, does Tommy Rees have to chew him out in the locker room before they come out, so it's away from the cameras, away from everybody else.
Take him into the showers or something.
That's right.
And start yelling at him.
You've talked, we've each coached, and there were times I was wound too tightly. And so I'd try to calm down and stuff like that. And then, some of the kids would just, kind of flatline and, they'd be like, I need you to get on top of me, just like Drew Pyne said that. I need hard coaching. You don't want to have to go to that all the time, obviously, and you don't want Tommy Rees have to go to that. But, obviously the viral do your effing job moment between Tommy and Drew, it was caught by NBC. Marcus Freeman talked about it this week. He was asked about it Thursday. Quote, "That's an intense moment that we had to try to find a way to get Drew to snap out and to be able to perform at the level we expect. And again, you don't treat every player the same in terms of how you coach them. You treat them in terms of what will help them respond in a right way and for that moment. That's what Drew needed, and Drew will be the first one to tell you that." End quote.
He's absolutely right. I mean, Drew will be the first one to tell you that, and I like that about him. I mean, people talk about, somebody said in the chat they like his moxie. Well, part of that is being a leader and taking that responsibility, and I think that's 100% accurate with him. And again, I hope they don't have to yell at him in the showers before the game. I hope he can, muscle up the fortitude to be that second half quarterback the entire game, because they're going to need him. They're going to need him today.
He just looked, and Tommy talked last week before the Cal game about Drew cares a lot, and all that kind of stuff. And Drew has, he's a pretty low key guy, but we've seen that Drew on the field that's got a lot of confidence. We were talking about the Conor McGregor, $1 billion strut and all that stuff last week. He just looked like a guy who maybe did care too much and was just wound a little bit too tight early on, and was trying to be too perfect rather than just playing. Because to me, he looked like he was trying to aim those balls, and then he's throwing them in. We were talking about with the Philip Seymour Hoffman that we talked about earlier this week from Along Came Polly. It's like, make it rain, but he's not making it rain. He's bricking everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marcus Freeman makes a good point. Anybody that's ever coached knows you have to treat everybody equally, but differently. Yeah. I mean, that's like coaching 101. I mean, we've both had guys on our teams that you can just lay into, and that's going to work, right? And there's other guys you got to put your arm around them, and you got to kind of Father Flanagan them. Yeah. And you got to kind of talk them through it, and you got to use your soft tones. And, a lot of times you could good cop, bad cop it, and you can send the kid that needs the arm around him to an assistant coach. You know what I mean? If you're the yeller, then you send somebody, but that's part of knowing who your team is. And I think, at least from that aspect, I do believe Marcus Freeman knows his team. I mean, he's pretty close to these guys. Say what you will about that part, but I think he knows his team, and he knows what's going to get them fired up individually and what's going to land as far as giving them the instruction.
Well, and that's the thing that he talked about as well, that there's trust between Tommy Rees and Drew Pyne. And Pyne talked about after the game about how he had texted Tommy Rees when he became the starter, when Buckner was out with the injury, and said, "I want you to coach me hard." And and again, there are obviously lines, but it wasn't. They didn't go straight. They didn't have just one gear on this. They tried to pat him on the back and reassure him, and positive reinforcement and all that stuff. It just wasn't working. So this was essentially, again, Tommy Rees had given Drew Pyne a pretty solid game plan to let him try to get into the flow of the game, make some easy passes early, but he's just spraying them all over the field. And I think, Tom, it obviously boiled over when you get 4 and outs to start the game. And the chew out even came before the fumble.
Right.
And then he goes out and fumbles the snap, obviously, but then is able to rebound after that. But they've obviously got a lot of trust. It sounds like they've got a good relationship when you hear both of them talk, and it's not just Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman, trying to cover up the tracks or whatever. It sounds like they got a pretty good relationship. Again, you don't want it to have to come to that. You just want the guy to be able to go out and play and make some plays.
And you want him to be prepared, obviously, and you don't want to have to manufacture the yelling or the whatever.
Exactly.
To get guys. You don't want to do that. I mean, that can't be the normalcy. Listen to some music to get yourself fired up or to calm you down or, whatever. You have to have a personal kind of approach to get you ready for a game. It shouldn't be up to the coach to scream at you to get you ready, right? I understand it was his first start. And there's a lot that goes on with that. His entire family was in the stands and it's a home game and it's all of these different things. And I'm hoping that he's kind of flushed a lot of that going into week 2 as the starter. Plus, it's on the road. It's going to be a completely different environment. It's easier to kind of circle the troops and just be like an all against the world kind of a thing and just go down and do your job, right? I mean, it's just completely different than a home environment, right? So, again, I'm hoping that he comes out and is the Drew that he was in the second half.
Yep. Josh P. is going to the game, wants to know where the IB meetup is, and I haven't really heard anyone talking about it. I will just say, if you are going to the game and you're planning on actually going to the game and not just tailgating, be careful in terms of aftermarket tickets because the North Carolina Athletic Department issued they put out a statement, a warning the other day to warn people about counterfeit tickets because the game is sold out.
Yeah.
So make sure you've got like a legit e-ticket, I think probably. I don't know if everything is e-ticket, but they were talking about barcodes could be faked and all kinds of stuff. So be careful if you're out there looking at tickets because who knows if you'll actually be able to get in if you try to buy something in the parking lot out there at the tailgate.
Yeah, well, that's a good call. And obviously, you and I are at home, so we are not going to be at the North Carolina game.
That's right.
And Brian is out there, but I don't believe he is planning like an IB meet and greet. So if there is one, it's going to be viewer-led, not IB-led. I will say that.
How about Chris Tyree? We were calling for more Chris Tyree last week. We finally got more Chris Tyree. That's right. More cowbell, baby. 17 carries, 64 yards, 5 catches for 44 yards. And, of course, the touchdown reception. I mean, sure looked like the offense worked pretty well when you've got a good athlete on the field taking the ball with 22 total touches after he had totaled 12 touches the 2 previous games combined.
I mean, duh. Like everybody, media, fans, like everybody was wondering why is 25 not getting more touches? And, we as media were wondering it out loud and it wasn't just us. I can promise you that. It was every media outlet that I know were doing the same thing. And I don't know what the reasoning behind Chris Tyree not playing the first 2 weeks, or I should say not playing, not getting the touches that he should have the first 2 weeks.
Right.
But he got them last week, and it proved to be the right call. Amazing. And if it's not the same this week, I'll be very, 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 very disappointed because, this team was thriving off of what Chris Tyree was doing. And I will also say it was a great rotation between him and Estime. I mean, they were literally rotating them in the middle of series as opposed to you get a series and then you get a series and then you get a series. It was more
changing it up all the time.
It was situational, which I thought was fantastic. I thought
sometimes both of them together.
Yes, thank you. That's a really good point. The 21 personnel.
Yeah.
Please. Like that was great too. And both of them had catches for the first time. And I mean, the way they use the running backs, and I don't know if it was because Logan Diggs was a little bit banged up, and so he wasn't even available. So it was just the 2 guys, right? But the way that they used them was brilliant. I mean, it was fantastic. It really was. And I hope to see more of that because I think they can have a lot of success against this North Carolina defense. I mean, that could be one of the difference makers in some of those matchups, getting those guys on the outside, running
Yeah.
it up the middle, all of those different things. So thank goodness they finally got Chris Tyree the ball on a consistent basis.
Well, and like you talk about the 21 personnel, which I love. They've got them both in the backfield, split with Drew Pyne in the shotgun, and they send Estime in motion to the left, and it ends up setting up the touchdown pass to Chris Tyree. Estime motions to the left. It brings the safety over, opens up that seam for Tyree. Boom. All Drew Pyne has to do is hit a little short pass, and Tyree's in the end zone. It was beautiful. It's like you can do things like that. That's the kind of thing that Tommy Rees can do with those guys. And, again, when you're lacking at the wide receiver position and you've got two running backs who can catch the ball the way they can, and they can set each other up in ways like that, to me, it's a thing of beauty. And Estime ends up 18 carries, 76 yards, touchdown, and then 3 catches for 43 yards. So
it was great. I mean,
yeah.
The way they use, like I said, the way they used the running backs was brilliant. I mean, it just was. And Estime had his first really good game between the tackles, and Tyree was great between the tackles and receiving the football. I mean, all of it was great. Let's see what they do. Let's see what the encore is to that game plan, and hopefully it is similar, frankly, with just adding a few downfield passes.
Yeah. You touched on the offensive line earlier, and again, I think especially the second half is the best half that we've seen from the offensive line this season. Did allow 2 sacks, but one of them came early on that Mike Fire, where they got to Drew Pyne, just 1 sack after that, 4 tackles for loss, but they were infinitely, again, better in the second half, dominated at the point of contact, drove Cal's line backwards in the second half, and just really looked more like the offensive line that we thought we were going to get. And I think today sets itself up where they can really be dominant once again.
Yeah, I really hope that the offensive line can be dominant. And like, we talked about in the post-game show and upon further review, the left side I thought was pretty darn good last week. And that's from the center over. So Zeke Correll, Patterson, and Alt, I thought played pretty darn well, with the exception of that Mike Fire. And the right side in Josh Lugg and Fisher, I thought there's a lot of room for improvement over there. And I expect it to happen. I mean, I think that Josh Lugg is still the right guy, but he was looking lost in space at times. And frankly, Fisher was a little bit lost as well. And so if we can see the left side or the right side catch up to where the left side is, this line's going to be pretty darn good. And then they can keep improving together as a unit. Then you're going to be in great shape. It's just, I think the right side is still a little bit behind where the left side is at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And I've got this quote, and I just saw somebody mention this in the chat. We finally saw Tobias Merriweather last week. So that was the good news. Now, he didn't get the ball. They had him in there, I believe, in the first half. Did he play at all in the second half? Do you remember?
See him. No, I don't think so.
It seemed like most of his snaps were in the first half.
I think when he didn't go in motion, I think that was the end of the day for him. So I think he made that one mistake, and that was it.
I think so as well. And someone said, Crazy Reese can say if Angeli needs to play, they're not going to ask him to do too much, but won't do the same with Tobias. And Marcus Freeman was asked about Angeli, and he basically said, he's their only option behind Drew Pyne.
He is
right now. And here's the quote. I was going to do this later, but I think this quote did make me think of the Tobias situation when I heard Marcus Freeman saying, now, obviously the quarterback position is a little different because you've only got one where you have more bodies at wide receiver, so it's a little different, but he says, I don't think you're going to ask Steve Angeli to run every single play that you're asking Drew Pyne to run. It takes time to learn the entire package, the entire offensive system. But guess what? Steve Angeli, if he's presented with the opportunity, has to go in there and execute, and he has to go in there and be able to do what we need our quarterbacks to do. And so we have to meet him halfway. We've got to be able to ask Steve Angeli to do the things that we know he can do, but it also has to be enough that you're not running one play. End quote from Marcus Freeman. Now, again, like, doesn't it seem like you can apply that to Tobias Merriweather? Pretty
like
much everything he said. And if you want to get, and if you want to get Merriweather on the field, you can get Merriweather on the field based on that.
I mean, makes sense to me. I mean, I don't know why you would make concessions for one position and not another position, especially when that other position is very shallow on depth. And honestly, not playing very well. So, yeah, I don't really understand it. And frankly, wide receiver is a heck of a lot easier to play than quarterback.
Yeah, because quarterback, you really do need to know more.
Yes.
There's a lot more there's just you need to know as much of the playbook as possible. Now, again, if they're giving him like a quarter of the playbook and it's like, okay, we're going to work within these limits, that you're not going to, go outside of that. But at the same time, it just, we keep saying it over and over again. It doesn't have to be that complicated with Tobias Merriweather. If you're worried that, okay, with route concepts, like he doesn't know necessarily when he needs to break it off or when he needs to go, that kind of stuff, you just say, this play, you're running a go. This play, you're running a post. Regardless of what happens, that's what that's what you're going to run.
And there are plays like that in the playbook. I guarantee you, not every single play in the playbook is an option route, right? I mean, that's just, it's very frustrating to me.
Yeah,
because even at the high school level, you can teach kids one or two routes, and they can be successful with it. I mean, we had a kid who was a really good safety, and he was just really, really fast. And I was like, in the middle of the game, I pulled him aside and I said, look, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go in at wide receiver. You're going to make one quick stab to the inside. You're going to go and run a go route, essentially. Wide open for a touchdown. Now, I'm not saying it's that easy, at the college level, but
it doesn't have to be as complicated as it gets made.
That's all I'm saying. I mean, it's not, again, wide receiver can be a complex position, but it does not have to be to get the basics down and to have a small package to be in the game for and be targeted for. That's the frustrating part. You tell me on the goal line, you can't teach him how to run a fade to the corner of the end zone and out jump a guy.
Right.
Those are the things that bother me the most, I think, about that. And I thought that was going to go away with the last position coach, but so far it hasn't. And that's frustrating. Now, I will also say the last position coach, Tobias, wouldn't even been on the field last week at all. At least he got a handful of plays, even though he was just kind of out there as a decoy.
True.
So I guess that's literally a baby step in the right direction. Let's see if that continues, on the road this week.
Yes, exactly. Speaking of this week, how about North Carolina? 3-0. They've got dominating wins over Florida A&M, Appalachian State, and Georgia State. This is year 4 for Mac Brown. And it's in a way, it seems like he just got there. But in a way, it's like you think about how long the guy's been coaching. He was there from 1988 to 97 before he went to Texas from 1998 through 2013. Of course, won a national championship with the Longhorns. Didn't coach for 5 years and then comes back and has been with, again, Carolina for 4 years now. It's crazy that, and I was thinking about this earlier in the week, and then I actually saw this in the notes. Notre Dame and the ACC, of course, started that scheduling agreement back in 2014. North Carolina, with their game against Notre Dame today, is going to become the first ACC team to play Notre Dame 5 times since that arrangement began. This is going to be the 3rd consecutive year and the 5th time overall Notre Dame and North Carolina have met since that scheduling agreement with the ACC started back in 2014.
It's funny that you mentioned that because it does feel like they play North Carolina all the time. Like
I know
that feels like they're one of the teams that just Notre Dame plays home and away, and the rest of the ACC schedule rotates and changes and whatnot. So that's actually very interesting to see that this is the only team that they've played 5 times. It feels like they've played other teams a lot too, but North Carolina is a team that they've played a bunch, and frankly, they've had North Carolina's number, and North Carolina has not been North Carolina against Notre Dame. Notre Dame has handled them pretty well over, that run of 5 years. And so, hopefully it's the same situation today. I think that this is, granted, I'm getting into the Notre Dame side again, but I think this is a big opportunity for the Notre Dame defense.
I agree. I agree. But, like the Larry Fedora, North Carolina, that's the one that Ian Book made that first start against in what was that,
Right.
2017? Yeah, when Brandon Wimbush was still the starting quarterback and you had Josh Adams and that whole crew. And Ian was not very good that day, but North Carolina was so bad that
Right.
the Irish were able to overcome a couple of bad Ian Book interceptions and win that game fairly handily. But they've at least been better, and they've had a lot of good offenses.
Yes, they have.
Under Mac Brown and Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator. He has been the offensive coordinator there all 4 years. I mean, like you look at Sam Howell in his 3 seasons, over 10,000 passing yards, 92 touchdowns, and completed 64% of his passes under the offensive coordinator, Phil Longo. And through 3 games this year, they're the number 4 scoring offense in the nation, over 51 points a game, number 8 pass efficiency offense, and number 7 in third down conversions, converting 56% of their third downs. Now, again, there is a grain of salt maybe, but scoring points is scoring points, even if it is Florida A&M, Appalachian State, and Georgia State.
Well, I mean, we can poo-poo the opponents all we want, and the argument that anybody would make who's on the North Carolina side, they have to say one word: Marshall. I mean, it's Notre Dame lost to Marshall, right? And so you can poo-poo Florida A&M, App State, Georgia State, whatever. I mean, that's fine. You're more than welcome to do that. And North Carolina's put up a lot of points, but Notre Dame should have put up a lot of points against Marshall, and they shouldn't have lost.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I can pick apart the North Carolina schedule, and rightfully so. I mean, those are 3 powder puff type teams, and they almost lost to App State. They only won by 2 points, but they both scored 60 points. So it's like, were there even defenses on the field that day? That's the biggest question. It felt like watching the beginning of Brian Kelly's practices, where it was just offense on air and they were just going up and down the field and all of those different things. So yes, those teams are inferior to North Carolina, but North Carolina won those games. They did what they needed to do. 2 of the games were 1 possession games. And so that, gives Notre Dame some hope, I would hope, but they still put the points up. They still put the ball in the end zone. They still put the ball through the uprights. I mean, they did what they needed to do to outscore those opponents. Notre Dame hasn't been in a shootout. They have no idea what it's like to be in a shootout. I have a feeling they're going to know what it's like today.
I was going to say, the question is, can they stay in a shootout if it becomes a shootout?
Exactly.
Because it is a really interesting matchup. Like you've got this quarterback, a redshirt freshman, Drake May, who has thrown for 930 yards in those 3 games, 74% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, just 1 interception. He's also only been sacked 4 times. His 930 yards are the 15th most in the country right now, and he's also got the number 6 completion percentage. And this is a redshirt freshman. Again, like, regardless of who you're playing against, to be a young guy who got a handful of snaps in a couple of games last year in relief of Sam Howell, nothing substantial, by any means, to do what he's done coming in. It's very impressive.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And the fact that he's a redshirt freshman, they deserve all the credit in the world for getting him ready and him coming out of the gates strong. I mean, he had a year to sit behind Howell, which obviously was a pretty good, a nice North Carolina quarterback 101 crash course. And he's just kind of taking it and run with it. I mean, literally and figuratively. I mean, he's a really good quarterback. And if you can't get pressure on him and get him off his base, and if you just let him, own the pocket, he's going to hurt you, period. So again, we thought the Notre Dame defensive line stepped up their game last week. They're going to have to step up their game again this week and put some pressure on this kid. There's no doubt about it. And guess what? The linebackers are going to have to show up because they're going to have to be a part of this as well. So a lot of ifs, obviously on this one, but this May kid, he's the real deal. I mean, he fits this offense really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing, because we all know Longo's offense can score if they have the right guy distributing. I think it was a nice clean handoff from Howell to this kid.
Yeah. They're also running for 237 yards a game. So they're throwing for 310 a game, running for 237. And he's a mobile quarterback, 7.6 yards per play. They ran 73 plays against Notre Dame in the win that Notre Dame had last year, and they're averaging 72 plays a game this year. So it's right about the same, with they go from a 3-year starter to a redshirt freshman, and the offense has not changed much. They've got good skill position players. Josh Downs has missed the last couple of games. Their best wide receiver led the ACC with 101 catches last year, 1,335 yards and 8 touchdowns, and ranked in the top 11 in the country in receiving yards per game last year. They haven't even had him the last 2 games, and May and the offense haven't missed a beat. If anything, it might have been beneficial to May, not just to have to lock in on your superstar guy, and they're distributing the ball all over the place. He's distributing the ball all over the place.
Well, hopefully he locks back in on that kid, and the offense starts to sputter a little bit, and he tries to force the ball to the veteran and all these different things, right? We can hope for that. But no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. From a North Carolina side, I think when you have a young quarterback who, would rely on your playmaker, right? And not unlike Tyler Buchner was somewhat relying on Michael Mayer. I mean, I think it's a very similar situation, right? And if Michael Mayer wasn't in the game, he would have been forced to throw it to other guys. May was forced to throw it to other guys, and hopefully he's gotten some I say hopefully. As a North Carolina fan, hopefully he's gotten some confidence in his other wide receivers, his tight ends and all these different things. Hopefully he's gotten confidence in those guys. So you're right. He's not locked in on Josh Downs. From a Notre Dame perspective, I hope he's like, I got to get Josh Downs the ball. And then he just tries to, needle it in there. And then that leads to, I don't know, hopefully Notre Dame's first takeaway of the season. That would be nice.
Yeah, no kidding, right? No kidding. Now, the other side is, as good as the offense is, the defense is that bag. Oof. Gene Chizik, the former Auburn and Iowa State head coach, and is in his first season back at North Carolina as defensive coordinator. He was there under Larry Fedora, actually, originally in 2015 and 2016. Fedora, by the way, now the head coach of the New Orleans Breakers of the USFL. Ooh. So that's where Larry Fedora is right now. But Gene Chizik was out of coaching after that stint with Carolina and Larry Fedora from 2017 through last year, and he is back. The return has not been great, so maybe that can be good news for Notre Dame today. The defense rather is allowing nearly 38 points a game, 193 rushing yards a game, 275 passing yards per game. I think you look at this, and this is the best opportunity Notre Dame has had to really put some points on the scoreboard this season, Vince.
No doubt about it. I mean, no doubt about it. No matter who the quarterback is, no matter who the offensive line is, no matter who the running backs are, Notre Dame should be able to put some points on the board. And I hesitate to say that Notre Dame can keep up in a legitimate shootout, like 50s, 60s, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, yeah. I really have a hard time seeing that. But Notre Dame should be able to move the ball. And as long as they don't make the uncharacteristic mistakes that I shouldn't say uncharacteristic, shouldn't make the mistakes that they made last week with the false starts, because those false starts all happened at like very key moments, right? They were like on third.
When it's third, yeah, they're all like third and short, and now all of a sudden it's 3rd and 8.
And they were all by veterans. They were by veterans, right? It was Lindsey who couldn't line up correctly. It was Patterson. It was Correll. Like it was by veterans, and you cannot have that, especially in that situation when your offense has been struggling, and you turn, a 3rd and 3, a very makeable 3rd and 3 into a 3rd and 8. Like that's a massive difference. That's a massive difference, even though it's only 15 feet. It's a massive difference. So they can't shoot themselves in the foot offensively in this game. If they just go out and execute the game plan, whatever the game plan is, if they just execute the game plan, they will put points on the board against this. This defense is not very good. They're just not. And Notre Dame should have their way with them. Now, when I say have their way, that doesn't mean they're going to put 60 up, right? It just means that they're going to be able to score more than 3 touchdowns, right? More than 21-ish points than they have, in the first 3 games. So I have a lot of hope. I can't say I have a lot of faith. I have a lot of hope that the offense is going to be able to turn it around, because they have a great opportunity against a defense that's been struggling.
Yeah, I agree. Anthony says, and thanks for the super chat. Anthony, thanks for this program every Saturday during the football season. And of course, there'll be a post-game show later today as well.
Yes.
Now is it always you and then Ryan and Brian and Sean? Is it all, typically all four of you, or how does that usually work?
The only two that have made it to every single post-game show have been me and Brian.
Okay.
Because I believe the Marshall game, Sean and Ryan were at the game with their families. So we gave them the night off, and Brian and I took that L together. And then last week, Sean was on the show and Ryan was not. So it's a smorgasbord. You might get all four of us. You might get four of us, but you're guaranteed to get me and Brian. That's for sure. And since Brian's on the road, I have a feeling that I'll be starting with either or Ryan and Sean. So it might be the three of us, and then we'll wait for Brian to jump in.
All right. Hopefully everyone's smiling once again.
Well, here's hoping. And make sure you hit that notification bell, because we never know exactly what time that show is going to start. We try to plan it out for everybody getting back into the same place and all of those different things. So my guess would be about 8 o'clock, but make sure you hit that notification bell so you get that notification when we set the show up.
All right. Charlie Weiss, last belt loop, another super chat. Reported on IB, Chansey is being overruled on players he wants to play. Won't get better until Reese is gone. Throw to Tobias, please. And, I think that there's definitely some of that stuff going on, sort of like, I don't know if it's total power, that, struggle dynamic and that kind of stuff. But there's, you do have, you've got, sort of a lot of new regime, versus, you do have some holdovers in there. So I think there's some different dynamics at play with how things are being decided.
Yeah, I agree. There's some different dynamics, and it's unfortunate because I don't think they're playing enough guys. I don't think they're playing the right guys at times. And again, that's my opinion on the outside looking in. I don't know what the dynamic is inside the Goog and all of that. And I believe Brian was the one reporting that, so I don't have any first-hand knowledge of that. So I don't want to speak on something that I don't know. But I mean, I would venture to say that it's true. I trust Brian, obviously. I trust his sources. So if he's saying that, then it must be true. But it's a shame. It's a shame. And I understand that the offensive coordinator wants to have the final say if that's who it's coming from. But man, your position coaches know your guys the best, and I would hope that they have a larger say in who plays and who doesn't.
Yes,
that's what I'll say.
That's you've got to have trust in them.
Yes,
if they're part of your staff, you got to have trust in them too.
And because if you don't have trust in them, they're not going to have trust in you, and you're going to have all kinds of other issues. I mean, I've been on a staffs as an assistant where the head coach didn't trust his assistant coaches, and it felt like a mutiny, frankly. I mean, it was just, it just wasn't a good working environment. And I hope that's not the case. I'm maybe speaking out of turn here. I'm talking about my experience.
Yeah.
When there's not trust going both ways, that's a huge problem.
Right. Well, as we look at this matchup today, Fighting Irish in the chat, very confident.
Whoa, baby.
He bet $2,500 on Notre Dame money line at plus 115. Said he doesn't need the points. Go Irish. So I'm glad you're confident in $2,500. I don't have $2,500 to throw around, so I am not that confident. The line did move a little bit though today, Vince. I don't know if you saw it. It's now minus 2.5.
Really?
In North Carolina's favor. It was 1.5. So the money obviously going on North Carolina right now. Again, this is a really interesting matchup because you look at North Carolina strength, offense.
Mm-hmm.
Is Notre Dame's defense the strength? Like, what is the strength of this team right now? Is it strength on strength and weakness on weakness? Like, how do you look at this?
I mean, that's a really good question. And I think if you're forcing me to pick one, then yes, I would say that right now the strength is the Notre Dame defense.
At least a little bit more, right?
I mean, I haven't been super happy with the defense down the stretch, but I think overall, and especially the way the defense played last week, I think the defense is the strength. It's funny, a bunch of people are saying special teams. Yeah, you're probably right. Special teams is probably the strength of this
John
team.
Sott. Just go with John Sott.
Hey, man.
He's the answer to the questions.
And
he's the strength.
Groupie's 100%, right? From field goal range. That one didn't count. So he's 100%. Right. hit all his PATs. But no, I think this is strength on strength and weakness on weakness. And I think Notre Dame's weakness is stronger than the North Carolina weakness. But at this point, going into it, not by much, right? I mean, they can prove a lot of people wrong at this point. Like, they have a great opportunity to prove people wrong. But right now, they're barely better than the Carolina defense, I think.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question for this game, Marcus Freeman didn't come out and say it, but it sounds like we could see a similar game plan to Ohio State, like ground and pound and, try to control the ball, keep away. And I still think that we are seeing a defensive-minded head coach sort of trying to figure out who he is, or, a defensive-minded first-time head coach trying to figure out sort of who he is. And again, like what kind of trust he has in the other side of the ball, in those kind of things. Like he wants, it's generally been very conservative. I like the game plan better last week with Drew Pyne, and again, specifically the personnel packages. But I'll just throw it to you, Vince. Do you think Notre Dame can win? Like, if their plan of attack today offensively is ground and pound, can they win that kind of game against North Carolina today?
I mean, you would limit their offensive possessions, right? And I'm sure that as a defensive-minded coach, then that's what you want. That's what you go in. I mean, he's basically said that's what he likes, right? You can win it, possibly, but you've got – I'm sorry, you've got to open it up a little bit. Excuse me, a little bit more. I mean, I don't know if you're not going to be able to win a shootout that way. So, I mean, if the defense doesn't show up, okay, so here's my caveat. If the defense doesn't show up and North Carolina is scoring fast, they're scoring often, you can't have a ground and pound because you're not going to be able to score fast enough.
Yes.
So a lot of that hinges on what the defense can do, to be honest with you. But I think either way, North Carolina is going to score. And so you're going to have to stretch the field. You can't let them pile everybody in the box and have more hats than you can cover and just bang your head against the wall all day. You can't do that. So I think they have to open it up. Can they win it that way? Maybe. But that goes a lot on the defense. A lot.
I agree. They need to run the ball today, but I don't think that needs to be the only plan of attack. To me, the biggest thing, this is still a team that's only averaging 3.3 yards per carry right now. To me, it's just when you run the ball, you need to be in that 4.5 to 5 yards per carry range, especially against a bad defense like they're going to see today. That's the biggest thing, is when you run, can you effectively keep yourself on schedule, in terms of moving the chains? It doesn't need to be, like they're not going to obviously go out and all of a sudden be a triple option team. But, the game plan against Ohio State, that was one thing. I think it just needs to be you run the offense similar to last week. Now, again, it's not going to be a carbon copy of last week, but this is an offensive line that Notre Dame's offensive line should be able to dominate this defensive line for North Carolina. They've got undersized linebackers. They've got some fairly good guys up front, but they haven't shown that they're capable of standing up and stepping up and being physical in the way that Notre Dame can be physical. They're allowing 4.7 yards per carry themselves. So it can't be, run the ball first, second, and then all of a sudden now you're in third down and now you've got to throw the ball again and that kind of thing. Yeah. So, and I agree with what you're talking about in terms of the complementary nature. Drew Pyne still needs to be able to hit some shots.
Yes, no question.
And the bigger thing, if you want to run the ball, I mean, I'm still okay with that, but I don't want to see a bunch of 12 personnel on the field all the time. I want to see what they had last week. Now, you can, again, mix in some 12, but I want to see more 11 where you're spreading it out a little bit, so you're not bringing extra hats into the box and setting yourself up. You and I have talked about this a lot. If Notre Dame had better blocking tight ends, it would, that would be one thing if you want to go a bunch of 12 personnel, but they don't have good blocking tight ends right now, enough to bring that extra tight end and bring an extra body, into the box. I'd rather see 11. And I again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, love what they did with the 21 stuff with 2 running backs last week. I think you're better off doing that kind of stuff than you are with a bunch of 12 personnel and trying to pound people all day.
I agree. And if you really want to bring in a type of 12 personnel, then bring in another tackle. Don't
Yeah.
bring in a tackle eligible.
Good
Don't
call.
bring in a tight end who can't block.
Yeah.
Because right now, Michael Mayer and Kevin Bauman are not doing a very good job attached to the line of scrimmage and blocking. They're just not. And I love Michael Mayer. Everybody knows that, but he's not doing a very good job blocking right now. And so if you really want to put, 7 guys on the line of scrimmage, bring in another tackle. That's how I would operate at this point.
That's a good call. I like that. I mean, that makes more sense. An actual blocking body out there. Because it's funny because when you look at who's coaching the tight ends right now, it's a former wide receivers coach.
Yeah,
and when you look at the dual nature of tight ends in terms of receiving and blocking, they're doing pretty well as receivers, but they kind of look like maybe a guy with, who's coached wide receivers is coaching them instead of a guy with a tight end background more recently.
You make a pretty good point there. I never even really thought about that part of it. So, hey, look, if Mishawaka can run with multiple tackles, then so can Notre Dame. You know
That's right.
That's how I feel about it.
That's right. So we've got a question about Drew Pyne's ability to get the ball downfield, long ball, deep routes, etc. What do you think the passing game looks like for Drew Pyne? Yeah, that is the biggest concern. Can he get the ball downfield? Sure. We didn't see a vertical game last week. I've got my own thoughts on maybe, how they can get that going. I'd be interested to hear yours first, though, Vince.
Well, I think, Drew Pyne does not have the strongest arm in the world, contrary to what other people in the media want to tell you. Okay. He just doesn't. I mean, and his accuracy leaves something to be desired at times, right? Now, does he have the ability to throw the ball down the field? Yes. But I do think that he needs the assistance of the run game and the play action game in order to do so. Okay. He does. Now, I think he can hit some seam shots and some things like that off of play action, or not even off of play action. I mean, he can just drop back and hit those. Those are right in front of him. But I think if you're talking about long balls down the sideline, I think some play action would be appropriate. But again, your run game needs to be effective in order for play action to be effective. But I just feel like with his arm strength and his accuracy, you can call them accuracy issues or whatever, he needs the play action to kind of freeze guys for a split second to give him a bigger window to place the ball. Okay. And again, can he do it? Yes. He absolutely has the ability to throw the ball plenty far. That's not I mean, we saw, every time that they warm up when we were at practice, when he gets to the end of a stretch line, he chucks the ball about 40 yards to a manager. Yeah. I mean, and he's not even trying. He's got the arm strength to do it, but I think he does need a little assistance from the offensive scheme in order to make it effective.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The play action is going to be big, especially, I think everyone's pretty much expecting this Notre Dame team when they line up against them. It's like, okay, we've got to line up to stop the run, so I think that's going to be a very conscious effort, which again is why I don't favor 12 personnel, because all you're doing is inviting more bodies down into the box to load up to stop the run. And it also congests things when you start talking about the short passing game like we saw last week. But that's also why if you stay in 11 personnel and you've got a running back in the backfield, and Jesse was diagramming some stuff the other day. Okay, so we saw all these short route concepts last week. So now, like the little drags out into the flats where they had Lorenzo Styles and Michael Mayer, where Drew Pyne, remember, underthrew both of those last week. Well, so if you play action to the left and you're dragging those guys over there, and now all of a sudden, instead of that short route, you get a double move and the guy's going upfield. Concepts where you're doing an extra move off the short stuff that you showed last week, a little easy pump fake, and then all of a sudden a guy is upfield. Those kind of things, to help free up the receiver one, and again, to help, set Drew Pyne up for more success. He showed that he could hit that short stuff in the second half last week. So now if you design some of your concepts so it looks like you're going to do that stuff, and then you've got an extra, we haven't seen a whole lot of double move type stuff, but then, if you're doing some of that, that can help him get the ball downfield as well, where the pass doesn't have to be perfect because the
Right.
coverage probably isn't going to be as good.
Exactly. And that goes along with my point of making those windows a little bit bigger
Right.
from the design of the offense. Right. And I think that you and I are on the same page on that one. And I agree. I think that's a really good point to make. You want to give him the best opportunity to complete passes down the field. So you need to kind of scheme your way into doing that. Can you do it? 100% you can do it. There's no doubt. And again, I've used this comparison before. Maybe it's not a good comparison because he just won a national championship, but Stetson Bennett is not an athletic, specimen, right? He doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but they call shots down the field, but they call shots down the field based on how good their running game is.
Right.
And so he's able to complete those passes, right? It's a similar situation. I want people, oh, you won a national championship. What are you talking about? Yes, I understand that. But he also won it on the heels of a good defense, right? And a good running game. Drew Pyne could very, very well benefit from a really good defense and a good running game. So that's the point I'm making.
No, I agree. We are not Marshall. If we fall behind by 14 early, it might as well be 100 with zero explosive play potential. We can't play from behind today. I mean, there is still explosive play potential in this team, especially, like Chris Tyree, Lorenzo Styles, Braden Lindsey. It's a matter of how you're going to use those guys to set them up to have success with explosive plays.
Absolutely correct. They've got explosive playmakers, but you're going to have to scheme your way into getting them the football, and they started to do that a little bit more with with Chris Tyree last week, right? But it needs to be more than that. I need to see Lorenzo Styles get a little bit more involved. Now, granted, Lorenzo Styles catches that one ball, he gains about 30 yards. So
exactly.
I mean, there is some player accountability to that as well. But you need to get the ball in the playmakers' hands. Braden Lindsey, if he gets the ball in space, he's going to be dangerous. Lorenzo Styles, Chris Tyree, all of those guys, you can get them the ball, good things are going to happen. That they are talented, they are explosive, they can do it, but I kind of tend to agree with that statement. If they get down by 14, I start to panic.
Oh, I would too. And that's, like I'm thinking about the old, going back to what are you going to do if you win the coin toss thing? I think you've got to probably put the offense on the field first in a game like this. What would you do?
Honestly, I would put the defense on the field because I want my strongest unit on the field first. Now, that could backfire if they go down and score right away, obviously. But I'm hoping that my defense can force, a punt, and then we get the ball in the second half as well. I would put the defense on the field first because I think they're my strongest unit.
I mean, I can see that, but again, it's like
it's funny because I don't know.
Do you want to risk falling behind early?
Sure. No, I get that. And here's the other thing. I don't think that there's a right or a wrong answer to taking the ball or deferring in general. I really don't. People make such a big deal about that. It's personal preference. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer there.
Right.
As long as you think it's the right answer as the head coach, then I'm all for it. I don't, what it is, but you can make an argument for either side in every single game.
I mean, obviously, if you succeed and your defense comes out, sets the tone, forces a punt and or even, just holds them to a field goal on the first drive. I'm not saying that, field goal would be six, but, like as long as it's not a touchdown and you're not behind 7-0 early, but that would be the concern because you're already concerned about, can your offense keep up with a team like North Carolina? The thing with Clark Lee, like if I go back a couple of years to like the last time Notre Dame played at North Carolina, remember that game? They're out there at Carolina and, all we're talking about is this explosive offense. And they had even better skill position players now who are all in the NFL, from the quarterback to the receivers and the running backs and everybody. And they came out, they had a little bit of success early on, but then what Clark Lee was always able to do was figure out, even if you had some early success, how am I going to make you one-dimensional? That's what he was able to figure out. We haven't necessarily seen that yet with Al Golden and his defenses. How am I going to make you one-dimensional? Because like Al Golden still kind of looks like a guy who had been in the NFL for 6 years, sort of figuring out how to reacclimate himself to the college game a little bit.
No, I think there is an acclimation process, and again, I thought he called a perfect game just about against Ohio State.
Yeah.
But, you had all summer and all offseason to
That's
prepare
exactly
for
right.
that. You had the time and you had the opportunity, and you probably don't expect your linebackers to play the way they've played the first few weeks. So, you're going to have to adjust, and you're going to have to, maybe change up what you think is going to work, for something that is going to work, I guess. And maybe it's not ideal for what you want to do right now, but it's what you're going to have to do to win a game. And I think that's probably the most important part of this whole thing is seeing Al Golden kind of adapt not only to the college game, but to Notre Dame specifically and the personnel that he's working with, even more specifically, the linebackers that he's working with. I mean, it's almost unfathomable to me the manner in which the linebackers have played as a group. And that's just not okay, considering the guys on the staff that you have that have been linebacker coaches or have played the game at a high level. That position has to get better. It has.
Do you think they're thinking too much? Because it seemed like he finally just let the defensive line play last week. And, like we've known how talented that defensive line can be. They had 6 sacks, and all 6 of them came from the defensive line. That's kind of what it looks like is maybe, because he's talked about how smart these Notre Dame players are and how much he can put on them and all this kind of stuff. It seems like maybe the linebackers are just thinking too much and not just reacting and going out there and playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, here we go. K says recruiting the wrong guys. It's not recruiting the wrong guys. It's not recruiting guys at all. You're still.
I mean, that's a different regime that we're talking about.
You're still dealing with the Clark Lee era where he didn't recruit any linebackers during one of the cycles. Like that is biting them in the tush right now. They've got these veterans, and then you got these rookies, and there's nothing in between. And it is going to take. They need to get those other guys in. Frankly, they need to get the young guys in. Period. And because if the veterans aren't doing it, if they're not competing at the level that you need them to compete at, if they're not executing at the level that you want them to execute, you need to get these other guys in the game and see what they can do. Because frankly, right now, I don't think they can do worse.
Well, and that kind of leads, and we'll get specifically into this matchup with Carolina's offense here in a second. But we were talking about Tobias Merriweather earlier, and the same guy, E-Week 2K. I don't know exactly what that is, but he says you can't get the top recruits if you're not going to play the best players. I thought that's what Coach Freeman was all about. And I think that does, when you've got some of these highly regarded receivers coming in and this highly regarded recruiting class coming in, and you do have some young, highly regarded, highly recruited players on this roster like Tobias Merriweather. Are guys going to start thinking about something else if you're not playing these guys?
There's absolute truth to that, because while one game is not going to make a person decommit, that's just not a reality, even though the fans get all up in a Twitter about it,
right?
Literally and figuratively. That's not a thing. But overall usage of young players is a thing. And that's a game to game to game to game scenario that they can clearly watch with their own eyes. And they can see, well, Tobias is really good and he's not playing at all. So why would I want to go there if I'm not going to play? And I can go to a Clemson and they're going to play all the true freshmen and they're going to get them involved. And, again, just using 2 schools as an example, but that's a legitimate thing. And if they're not going to play the young guys, Marcus Freeman can say whatever he wants, but a smart kid's going to be like, look, you tell me that, but then I watch the games and you're not getting those guys in when you were the head coach. So there was nothing in the previous offseason to go off of for Marcus Freeman. He could have promised the world, but there's no, backstory to what he has done as a head coach. Now there's going to be a whole season of it. And so when he gets back on the recruiting trail and he's like, hey, you can come in and you can play for us right now. The kid's like, well, Tobias didn't play for you, and I don't really understand why that was. So why should I believe you? Again, we're 3 games in. There are 9 games to go, hopefully a 10th. You have an opportunity to change that narrative. But right now, it's the same narrative that there was in the past, and that's not a good one.
All right. Well, let's talk about Notre Dame's defense against this North Carolina offense. They were good in the first half. They were, against Ohio State. Really, they were good for 3 quarters against Ohio State. This defense was. They were good last week, especially in the second half against Cal. Is that good enough to at least slow down this North Carolina offense today?
The flashes that we've seen from this defense are good enough to beat, North Carolina. There's no question in my mind. I think, they're not going to give up 60 like they did to App State.
Yeah.
I don't see that being the case. Or like, you know what I mean? They're not going to give up 60. I don't think they're going to give up 50. I really don't think they're going to give up 40. Maybe they get into the 30s, right? But that's substantially less than what they've been doing so far. So, they're averaging, what did you say? Like 50 points a game or something ridiculous like that? Is that
51?
What it was? 51 points a game. They're not going to
half.
They're not going to hit their average. Okay. So the defense needs to show up. I think they will. I think they're going to get May off of his platform a little bit. He's going to have to really make some plays on the run and things of that nature. Can he do that? Yeah, he can. But I think Notre Dame's going to make him work for a lot of the stuff that he gets. So, yes, this defense is good enough to beat North Carolina. No doubt about that. But they have to play a full game start to finish.
Yeah, and I think that the depth of Notre Dame's defensive line is going to be important today. Like, we've talked about maybe do they, is the rotation too deep and all that stuff, but he wants to get it out quick. It's like 1, 2, 3, get it out. They want to get out in rhythm and really kind of keep it moving. There's not a whole lot of time in the pocket. They need to be able, I think, to get up, be physical with North Carolina's receivers, in terms of the secondary. They need to make May have to go to his second and third reads and not just be able to go to his primary quickly. And that also means, disruption up front from Notre Dame's defensive line. Again, we've seen that. But again, like if he gets into that early thing and they're not getting to him early, they've got to be able to stay relentless throughout the game because eventually some of those rushes and pressures are going to be getting home, especially if you can get him off his first read and get him into his second and third read where he has to stand in the pocket a little bit longer.
No, absolutely. You've got to knock them off their tempo. You've got to knock them off of what they want to do. There's no question about that. And if they can do that, if they can make North Carolina kind of get out of their game plan, that's what is going to win the day for Notre Dame's defense. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And as Anthony said, gap integrity by defensive line is going to be important today. And I think the linebackers are going to be really important today because, again, it's what we saw last week with the escapability of Jack Plummer, who was not thought of as a mobile quarterback. Drake May, who we're going to see today, is a much more mobile quarterback. He's their second leading rusher, and he averages over 5 yards per carry. So, they've got to be gap sound, and the linebackers have to be able to step up and make plays and not just be bodies on the field out there against these guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The rotation, I think, is going to be really, really important defensively. I think that they are going to have to be smart about how they rotate their defensive linemen, but they're going to have to keep them rotated because North Carolina does want it. They're not going to go like super duper fast, but they do want to go fast, and that's going to tire out guys. And you're not going to be able to keep the same guys on the field for an entire drive if they're driving, right? And you're going to have to be able to rotate those guys. I would hope that they're not going to have all the twos out there at once. Linebacker is going to be very, very important. How do they replace, JD Bertrand in the first half? I think that's going to be a gigantic question mark.
That's true. We didn't even talk about that. Yeah, you're right.
I think that's going to be, I'm hoping to see more Junior Tui Alamaka, to be honest with you, which I really am looking forward to. But, how do they address that? Are they going to keep guys in the same position this game as opposed to moving them around a bunch? A lot of that is going to be very, very interesting because if they're not going to move them around a bunch, then you're going to have to see other guys come in. So what does that rotation look like? That's going to be one of my focuses, I think, during the first half of this game as I'm watching it is what's that rotation look like at linebacker?
I just realized that Stymie Snerdley's avatar photo for his chat is Donald Sutherland from Kelly's Heroes, the Clint Eastwood World War II movie where Donald Sutherland is the tank driver in that. That is awesome. I am drinking wine and I am eating cheese. If you haven't seen Kelly's Heroes, you need to go watch it sometime. But Stymie says the key to defense playing a full game is the offense eliminating constant 3 and outs. Can't have 3 and outs.
Nope.
Oddball. Thank you, Stymie. I couldn't remember the character's name. Oddball. Thank you very much. Great. I love that. I've got that DVD. I love that movie. Don Rickles, Clint Eastwood, Donald Sutherland. I think Telly Savalas might even be in that. Great.
You're such a movie buff. I'm so impressed.
Love those old world. I just got done watching The Dirty Dozen the other day on Netflix. It made a random appearance on Netflix, so I had to watch that. But that was the movie that Jim Brown retired from football to go do.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
All right, Vince. I've just realized how long we've been talking, and you know what it's time for?
Oh, is it finally there? Are we there? Are we finally there?
Rapid fire.
Yes, sir.
Game day rapid fire.
Yes.
Is finally here. So double fill in the blank with our first question today. Notre Dame's season so far has been blank, but if the Irish beat North Carolina today, it will be blank.
Devastating is my first blank. So Notre Dame's season so far has been devastating, but if the Irish beat North Carolina today, it will be somewhat better. I'm not ready to, start trumpeting all the successes of Notre Dame and all of these different. They're going to have to stack up some wins on top of each other. Obviously, this would be the first win streak of the season at 2, and you're 4 games in. And so you will have matched your longest losing streak up to this point. So I'm not going to get super excited about it because I think this is going to be a tough game to win. And I think the next game is going to be a tough game to win. And then
it is.
Then you get a stretch of games that are winnable, right? So if they can win these next 2 games, then I'm going to have kind of a different outlook on the season right now. But as it is, a win would make things a little bit better, but they're nowhere near where they need to be.
Yeah. I think the season so far has been shockingly inconsistent. If they win today, it would be the first step toward a possible happy ending because we all know what the inconsistencies are. We have seen them, and none of us saw this coming. Just like the Spanish Inquisition, nobody saw any of this coming. What we have seen so far, the loss to Marshall and everything that it's come with, Xanax, Corona. I like that. Those are good answers. We've got a lot of good answers popping in. So shockingly inconsistent, like the first half that we saw last week and then what it turned into in the second half. I think that's kind of the epitome of it. A shockingly inconsistent, really bad actually, first half, and it turned into a happy ending. And you win this game, you're at the 500 mark going into your bye week. And then you've got, as you said, you've got BYU coming up. This is a tough 2-game stretch.
No doubt.
If you want this season to amount to anything at all, today is about a must win. It's about as close to a must win as you can get. Again, it's a really good offense they're going to see, but it's also a really bad defense that they're going to see. And if this season is going to have any kind of happy ending, they pretty much have to win today. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I completely agree with that. And Marcus Freeman said something I thought was kind of interesting in his press conference about how he knocked off a bunch of firsts, first loss, blah, 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 blah. He hasn't gotten a win on the road yet. And so that would be a nice first to kind of put in your back pocket and move forward with, because you're not going to be back at Notre Dame Stadium for a few weeks now, right? Because you're on the road this week, you got a bye, then you go to Vegas, and then you're home, I think, against Stanford, if I remember the schedule correctly. But you're not going to be at home for a while. So you need to kind of stack some wins on the road now. And so that would be fantastic. And you're right. Michael Eakin is 100% right. Wow. Yeah. It would be hard to wear 1 and 3. No doubt.
I mean, think about that. Think about that.
I have a lot of Notre Dame stuff up in my office at school. And there's a helper.
Saying you might have to take it down if
all I'm saying is there's a student helper during one of the periods who's an Alabama fan, and
brother,
she gives me crap every day. 1 and 3 is going to be really hard to wear for a while with her. So Come on, Irish. Come on.
Yep, that's right. Just get to 500. Get to 500. Get that first road win like you're talking about, and things can change. That's absolutely right.
No doubt.
Last year's Notre Dame North Carolina game totaled 1,087 yards of total offense. Do you buy or sell this year's game topping 900 total yards?
I think if it goes over 900, Notre Dame's in trouble. So I'm going
because 700 of it might come from North Carolina.
This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. So I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to hope that this is a bit more of a less robust, offensive output from both teams. And I think that plays into Notre Dame's hands. So I'm going to go ahead and sell this and say that it's going to be under 900 total yards.
John is buying. Michael is selling. So we have got a split. I agree. I don't think it's going to get to that. Because like you think about last year and who you had at quarterback in these two games. You had Jack Cohn for Notre Dame. And again, opinions may vary on Jack Cohn, but running the tempo and getting things going. You had Kyron Williams in the backfield. And that, one play alone was 90 some yards on that touchdown run that he had. So you had those guys, and of course you had Sam Howell on the other side throwing to Josh Downs. I just think that Al Golden and the experience he brings on defense against a really good young quarterback who is still really good, but this is also just his fourth career start. And, there's got to be something there. There's got to be something in Notre Dame's favor there. And just like you said, I don't see Notre Dame being able to win a track meet. And so if it goes over 900 yards, again, the majority, it might not be 700, but the majority of it, unfortunately, is probably going to be in North Carolina's favor. I just think that Notre Dame's defense is going to be good enough to limit North Carolina more than they have been limited by any of their first three opponents this season.
Yes, I agree. I mean, and again, you look at their first three opponents and say what you want about, who they beat and, all of those different things. And I get it. That makes a lot of sense. But I mean, I still have to say if Georgia State can hold North Carolina to 35 points, then by goodness, I hope Notre Dame can. You know what I mean?
And like you look at Tommy, like what he's saying Notre Dame goes 425, 450 today, which is very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see Carolina in that same range. I'm still going to go under though. I'm going to go under. I think 800 is very realistic. 800 to 850, I think, is kind of what I'm looking at today for total offense.
I think it might be even less than that. I'm going to say like 700. I think that's where this is going to be.
I mean, if it's in that range, I give Notre Dame a really good shot to win. If it's 700 yards of total offense,
it might be a rose-colored glasses situation here where I'm thinking
you've always worn them. You've always worn them. There's nothing,
I'm thinking of ways that Notre Dame can win this game, right? And I'm hoping that it turns out that way. And so I'm hoping for 700 or less total yards. So we'll see how that'll be a fun one to revisit maybe next week. But that's what I'm hoping happens.
Well, we've got, a bye week next week. So we've got time to revisit a lot more things.
Right.
On next week's shows.
Exactly. Yep. No doubt about that.
Do you buy or sell the Irish getting their first 100-yard rusher today against Carolina?
You know what? I'm going to take off the rose-colored glasses and I'm going to put them down. I think Notre Dame is going to be more diversified. That I don't think that they're going to get to 100 yards. It would be great if they did, because I think that would go a long way for Notre Dame to win this game, right? But I'm going to sell it because I thought that the running backs had a good game last week and neither one was anywhere near 100 yards. So I'm going to say that they don't, but I'm going to sell it.
So you're going to say no. A lot of guys buying on this. Craig says we've got to be like one of the academy schools, run for over 300 yards. I don't know if it goes to that extreme, but if you do, again, that's like if Notre Dame is running for over 300 yards, you're winning this game, because that means that they've just done everything that they've wanted to do and they don't even have to throw the football and they're not chasing a lead. So they're able to keep running the football as well.
Sure.
I think this could be a game where you get both a 100-yard rusher and receiver for Notre Dame So I'm going to say that Chris Tyree, again, assuming they're feeding Chris Tyree the ball and it's a good mix of Tyree and Estime, I think this is the kind of game, where he's got a chance to really just, rip one or two off, where he's,
I hope so.
And he ends up, being that guy. And, maybe, again, like if he's doing it, then maybe, he's softening him up for Estime, and maybe even Estime is ripping off a couple. So I'm going to buy it. I think that this is a game where Notre Dame's finally going to get a 100-yard rusher today.
Hey, like you said, if you're right, I think Notre Dame wins the game, to be honest with you. And I think that would be fantastic. I don't know. I any kind of predictions offensively, I worry. I just do right now. I do.
Yeah. And that's been the thing, like when we look at over unders and spreads and all that kind of stuff, Notre Dame has just been all over the map so far this year. I think every game has gone under this year. Well, no, it depending on where you got it.
Okay.
Last week, because it was funny because I think it was like 40.5, and I was picking the over for Notre Dame. I didn't bet it, but I was picking, I picked the game to go over. Jesse got it at 41.5.
Oh,
and just missed it. And he bet the over.
It is amazing to me how accurate some of those over-unders are when it comes when it comes to basketball or football. Those over-unders they get it so stinking close. I mean,
I know.
Those guys have jobs in Vegas for a reason.
That's right.
Man, it's impressive.
That's right. What record does Notre Dame need to have at the end of the season for this to feel like a successful end after the 0-2 start?
Well, after the start,
we're talking about the floor, basically.
Right.
What's the minimum record need to be for this to feel like a success? Yeah.
So preseason, I said the very minimum would be 10 wins, and I'd be disappointed if they got to that point. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'll own that. I'll own that, right? I think that 10-2 is obviously the ceiling. I mean, that's the ceiling. You can't do any better than that. And so I think 9-3,
unless you go to a bowl game and win a bowl game too.
Sure.
At where you are. Well, hold it. They're 3 games in right now, right?
Yep.
So they're 1-2. Yeah. So yeah,
9-3 is the best. Is my floor as far as for a successful season. It's 9-3. I think you can drop one more and be at 9-3. And again, that's a disappoint. So as a season, that's very disappointing to me. Like that, I still feel like 10 wins was the floor for me. So it's still disappointing, but I think after the 0-2 start, 9-3 still feels like a successful season from a Notre Dame standpoint. And I get that, but 10-2 at the moment is still on the table, right? And I think 9-3, depending on how they finish, right? You still have an opportunity to back into a New Year's 6 game at 9-3. You have an opportunity depending on what happens around you.
Potentially. Okay? It's tougher for Notre Dame because you don't have conference championships.
I get that, but I think there's some teams that could knock each other off. There's some different scenarios. And when you get to the bowl games, then it becomes about brand, right? Because we're not talking about making the playoff. We're talking about making it into a bowl game that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I think at 9-3, they have an opportunity to make it into a New Year's 6. I think making it into a New Year's 6 is a success. How about that?
Wow. So you're still pretty much all or nothing on this team.
I am
right now. It's either you're accomplishing the most I thought you could accomplish coming into this season, or it's a total failure.
Well, no, I thought they were going to be a playoff team. So I mean, I've definitely lowered my expectations.
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. And we've kind of got answers all over the place. You definitely cannot be a 500 team. And I've seen more 8-4 than anything. And 8-4 and 9-3 might be tied. I just think that it's a pretty small margin for error, to even be thinking about 9-3 right now. I think, 8-4, that's 2 more losses, but that also means that you're going to have some combination of 2 wins over North Carolina, BYU, Clemson, USC. And that's the thing. Clemson and USC are still looming out there, not to mention, BYU. And that's, again, why today becomes such a must win when you start thinking about what is this season going to turn into at the end of it. So I think for me, again, this is minimal because this is where we are right now, taking out whatever because I'm like you, like we were mocking all these, the Vegas stuff with the 8-win, 8.5 over-unders and all that stuff. And that's pretty much what you're looking at right now. To me, minimal is 8-4. You're in a bowl game with a chance to basically get your 9th win in the bowl game against what should be a very winnable bowl game,
Oh, absolutely.
Based on the kind of opponent that you're likely to face.
No doubt.
At that point. So to me, the minimal is 8-4. And if you go 8-4, then you're what, 7-2 the rest of the way, right?
Yeah.
So I'd feel pretty good about that in the end, because again, this is about figuring out how to put some of these big inconsistencies that we've seen so far behind you and get a little bit better every week and come out feeling, good at the end of the season.
Sure. No, and to feel good about the end of the season, you got to win a bowl game. You got it. There's a lot of things that you got to do to feel good going into the off season. So, we'll see how it all goes, but I still have high expectations. I can't help it.
Yep. Yeah. And Jailbreak says it's true. 8-4 could be optimistic based on the way they
not
played.
wrong. I don't disagree with anything anybody said. Believe me. If you'd have told anybody in this chat and including us that they were going to lose to Marshall, you say there's no way, right? There's no way. So that's inconceivable. Well, it happened. It's very conceivable. And now we all have to deal with the aftermath of that.
And it's one of those games that completely changes the way you look at the rest of the season. Because if you lose to Marshall, you can lose to anybody on the schedule. That's what it comes down to.
Sure.
So after the Irish won last week with the green jerseys, can we put the green jersey jinx talk to an end now?
So I tried to do all kinds of research to figure out what their record is recently with the green jerseys. And I'm sure you have it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. All I found was articles written in 2015. So obviously that wasn't do us any good, but I know that they've worn the green jerseys against inferior opponents lately, and they've definitely reversed kind of the thought on the green jerseys. I think that a lot of people still feel like they're a jinx and all of these different things. I don't think it's a jinx in any way, shape, or form at this point. So yes, you can absolutely retire that thought and not retire the jerseys, because I like it when they wear green.
I believe it is 5 straight wins they have in the green jerseys right now. And the last time they wore them was Senior Day in 2018 against Florida State. The last time they wore them prior to last week, which I did not realize. So they wore them in 2018. They won. They wore them in 2016. They won. They wore them in 2015 at Boston College in the Fenway Park game and won. 2011 against Maryland in Washington, D.C. and won. Now, Jesse and I were talking about this earlier. 2011, they wore the white jerseys, remember, with the shamrocks on the helmet and all that stuff, with the green numbers.
Okay.
Do green numbers count as a green jersey game? Or do they have to be actual green jerseys to count?
People count it, in the 93 Sugar Bowl or whatever the year that was when Bennett and all that. They count that as wearing green. So
true.
Yeah, I think you do count it. I mean, if they're going to count that, you got to count this.
Okay.
Right?
So if they count that, then they've actually won. Let me see. So they just won 18, 16, 15, 11. 2013, the Shamrock Series game down in Arlington when they played Arizona State, they were all white uniforms, but green was prominent in the trim.
See?
They had gold numbers, but very green prominent in the trim. So if we're counting 2011 at Michigan as a loss, then we've got to count that Shamrock Series game as green as well, because there was so much green, including, stuff on the helmet. There was a lot of green prominent in those uniforms. So we've got to say they've won 6 in a row then in green.
Green, baby. Don't retire them.
It is not a jinx.
I like it. I like the green. I'm sorry. I
do too.
I do.
Wear them at least once a year.
I wouldn't mind, though. Somebody, I can't remember who it was. Somebody brought this up, and it might have been on social media or whatever. White pants with the green jerseys, I think, would look pretty solid.
Ooh, I agree. I would love just make your road uniforms, white jerseys, green numbers.
Yay, I'm down with that.
Maybe with some gold trim or something like that.
I like the green the green accents. I like that a lot, actually. And I really like those Sugar Bowl uniforms that they wore. I really did. So, yeah.
Yep. He said Jesse had a good point about the green jerseys. Notre Dame tend to wear them against the good opponents. Got to use them in the Shamrock series. I agree.
I'm fine with that.
I'm trying to remember, what are the Shamrock series uniforms this year? I don't even remember what they are.
Gold. Remember the Vegas?
Oh, that's right. It's the one that they've got on display over there inside the building.
I saw a bunch of guys wearing them at the game, this past game, and but yeah, it's the white with the gold. It's a good look. I don't think there's any green off the top of my head, but I thought it was a good look.
Yep. Last rapid fire question: buy or sell? It's time to change college football's instant replay system.
It's been time to change that for years. It's not about time. It's been time. Okay. So that's a huge buy for me. It is so confusing. It's so convoluted. I don't even blame, Marcus Freeman for not calling a timeout there, because he probably doesn't even understand the rules when it comes to the college football replay. It makes no sense. And I don't understand why the NFL, who just plays a day later every week, it's so simple.
I know.
It's so incredibly simple to understand.
Very simple.
You buy this, you say, you call up the NFL right now and you're like, hey, send me the PDF of your replay rules. We're instituting it in college football tomorrow. How hard is that?
Because part of it is, with every play in college football up for review by the booth, the booth can go to it anytime. Like we had the stuff with Ohio State, where, remember, they had a couple of close catches. They get up to the line of scrimmage and someone jumps off. It sure looked like the false starts were intentional, because if you false start, then you've already gone on to the next play.
Yeah.
And you can't go back and challenge that. So they just take 5 yards. It's still first down, and they go from there. And I've seen some other teams do it as well. It shouldn't have to come to that. There should just be one, it's college football, and you're already stopping the clock.
Right.
For every first down, and your half times are longer in college than the NFL, and it makes these games last that much longer.
Sure.
They're closer to 4 hours than they are 3 hours consistently, especially for these Notre Dame home games. But you shouldn't have to call a timeout. It should just go to the NFL system. It is a good system. It has been tested. It is a proven system. Go to the NFL system if you want. Make the last 2 minutes of each half, or the end of the last 2 minutes of the game, you're automatically going to the booth, and you're automatically checking scoring plays and stuff like that. That's fine. Just make the system what the NFL has. The coach has a flag. He can throw it out there. You get a couple challenges, and you keep the challenges if you win them. It shouldn't have to be as convoluted as it is in college.
Easy. So easy. And I want to see Marcus Freeman's arm strength too. So I want to see him chuck a flag like across the field and like hit the white hat.
That's right. That's right.
No, I mean, it's incredibly easy to understand the NFL version. There are so many intricacies and nuances to the college version. I just don't understand. It's a classic case of just overthinking the entire thing.
Right. Okay, Vince, I've got to get to a haircut appointment here in a little bit, and I've also got to post the podcast after the show. So we need to get through our picks for today's game. We're going to start with Notre Dame, and then we're going to go into our national picks as well. But we don't have to rip through these, but we've got to get done in a fairly reasonable amount of time. So let's start with Notre Dame, North Carolina. What do you think?
Well, this is week 4, and I still have no idea what to expect from the Notre Dame offense. Partly it's because this is the second start for Drew Pyne. This is, hopefully the reinvention and continual progression of the offensive line, and who knows what to think about the wide receivers and all of that. So this is a really hard one, because I know North Carolina can score. I know that the Notre Dame defense is playing really well at the front and then at the back. It's the middle that worries me. I don't know that it worries me enough for this game specifically, but you need your linebackers to play well, because, while North Carolina scores a lot of points, they are balanced. They can still run the football, and the linebackers are going to need to be involved in a good way and not just be invisible and running into blocks. So that's the part that worries me there. I think the offense takes another step. I think Drew Pyne will be ready to go from the beginning, whether Tommy Reese has to yell at him in the showers or not. I still think he's going to be ready to go for this one. He's going to hit the layups, because that's what That's who Drew Pyne needs to be. He needs to be able to hit the layups, and then you need to be able to take chances down the field. I think they continue with the Chris Tyree experiment because I think it worked out really, really well. I'm still predicting Notre Dame to win this one. I've got them 35 to North Carolina's 31.
Whoa, my microphone just fell off my desk.
That's not good.
Here. No, I know. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Most of what you're saying. I mean, the bottom line is this is a really good offense and a really bad defense Notre Dame is going to see today. And again, it's been against a different level of competition. I think that at least 2 of the 3 teams Notre Dame has played are better than 2 of the 3 teams that North Carolina has played. Maybe
Great.
App State is better than Marshall. You know, at the very least, I think Marshall's defense is better than the App State defense. So can Notre Dame move the ball enough? Can Notre Dame slow North Carolina down enough? I think that both of those things can happen today, because I think that where most games are won and lost is down in the trenches, in the lines, and Notre Dame's lines on both sides are better than North Carolina's. Notre Dame's secondary is better than North Carolina's. You're right. The linebacking core of Notre Dame is a huge question mark because of the way they have played so far. But ultimately, I think that Notre Dame can slow a young quarterback and a good offense down enough to get what they need. My score is close to yours. I've got Notre Dame winning 31-28.
Ooh, nice. A field goal game. Go
Yes.
special teams. All right. I agree with you. I think this is going to be a very interesting one, and I think we're going to learn a lot in the first half, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I do too.
I think we're going to learn a lot. I think we're going to know kind of where this game is trending in the first half. So hopefully it's bonus, or hopefully it's positive for the Irish, but we shall see in a few hours. But I'm nervous. Definitely nervous. I don't I don't feel great about this pick. That's the thing. In the past, I felt really good about my picks. I don't feel great about this one. So
I agree. Like, I really kind of talked myself into winning this game, into Notre Dame winning this game, because of what we talked about for the big picture. Because 2-2 versus 2-3, there is such a huge difference, especially going into the bye week, and you've got BYU coming. So I kind of talked myself into it a little bit. I tell you what, if they lose this game today, I'm not going to talk myself into anything the rest of the season. But I do think this is a game that Notre Dame can win. Will they?
We'll
That's
see.
going to be a big,
we
big
shall
question.
See.
All
right. Let's move on to some college football games that are going on out there. We like to always finish up the show talking about some of the big games. And we're going to start off with the...
We got more, Craig. We still got some of these national games. Don't go away yet.
Don't bail on it yet. All right. So number 5, Clemson Tigers travel to Winston-Salem to take on the number 21 ranked Demon Deacons of Wake Forest. The game kicks off here in about, 16 minutes over on ABC.
True.
Sean, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, this is like one of those... Clemson is going to show up. They're favored by 7.5. They're going on the road to Wake Forest. You know, their offense has already proved that they can score after they struggled last year. They're scoring more so far this year. You know, granted, Georgia Tech, Furman, Louisiana Tech, but they're averaging over 41 points a game so far. Wake Forest is averaging 42, but again, it's like VMI, Vanderbilt, Liberty.
Sure. Yeah.
But getting Sam Hartman back definitely has helped them since he missed the opener. But I just think that Clemson's defense, as always, when it comes to this particular matchup, where Wake can score some points against most teams, but they're not going to score at the rate that they're used to scoring when they go up against what's a really good Clemson defense. So I've got Clemson winning 48-24.
Whoa, big points for the Tigers.
Yes.
Look, Clemson is the number 5 ranked team in the country, I think almost by default at this point. I haven't been overly impressed with the Tigers. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei is playing okay, but he's under 50% completion against both of the FBS opponents.
True.
Take that for what it's worth. It's a stat, whatever. It's a stat that jumped out at me. I think, I really do like Sam Hartman. I think he's the better quarterback in this matchup, but I don't know that he has all the complementary pieces that he's going to need to knock off Clemson, even though it is at home. In order for the Wake Forest offense to be good, they have to be able to run the ball, and that's where Clemson is really, really, really good. So
Right.
I think that's kind of what it comes down to. I don't know that Clemson's going to score a ton of points because I'm still not sold on DJ, right? I'm just not. He's a big kid. He's a 5-star, recruit, but he hasn't lived up to that hype just yet. So I still have Clemson winning. I think they can go on the road and win this game. I have it a little bit closer than you do. I have Clemson 28, Wake Forest 17. So still a 2-score game, and maybe they pull it out at the end or whatever. But I think Clemson's going to win, but I think Wake Forest is going to put up a fight.
Right. Okay.
All right. Next up on the list, number 20, Florida Gators travel to Knoxville to take on the number 11 Tennessee Volunteers. Kickoff is set for 3:30 Eastern on CBS.
Boo. I wish it was a early game myself,
I know. It's gonna be right when we're really busy. But
I know.
What do you got?
Tennessee minus 10.5 in this game. The over-under is 62.5. And, Tennessee has run the ball really well, better than 182 yards a game so far this season. But they're a fairly undisciplined team. 8 penalties per game that the Vols are committing this year. And the Gators run the ball well as well, 212 yards a game. I think the passing game is anemic, though. Anthony Richardson already has 4 interceptions for Florida with no touchdowns. I just think that Tennessee is the better overall team, and Florida maybe kind of overachieving a little bit with a new head coach. I like some points in this game, though, and I like Tennessee to win 35-24.
Okay, I can see that. I think there's going to be some points in this game as well. And frankly, Florida hasn't even been tested outside of the swamp. I mean, this is their first big test on the road, and they're going to Tennessee.
Yeah.
That's a pretty tough task. That's a tall order for this Florida team that's been, inconsistent at best, I think is the best way to put it. I mean, that was a disappointing loss to Kentucky last week at home, right? Kentucky has won 1 time since 1979 before last week. And frankly, Florida blew it, in my honest opinion. So I think the Vols, all that Tennessee has to do is be balanced offensively. And I think the Florida defense is going to let them down. And, I hope Florida enjoyed being ranked, because I don't think that's going to be the case after this is over. I think Tennessee wins 31-20 or 31-17. I think Tennessee can put some points on the board against Florida. And yeah, Florida's dropping out of the top 25. I thought it was hilarious that they went from unranked to 12, 2 weeks ago. And then they dropped to 20, and then I think they're going to be out. So
I know
the rise and fall of the Florida Gators is hilarious.
Yep, for sure.
All right, next one on the chopping block. Number 10, Arkansas travels to College Station to take on the number 23 Texas A&M Aggies. That game is a night game set for 7 o'clock on ESPN.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad. That'll be nice to watch as I'm finishing things up tonight after our game is over with, to be able to watch a little bit of the. At least I hope it's a good game to watch. It's just that Texas A&M offense has been so bad. They're favored by 2.5, which basically means it's a home game, so they're getting to it. So it's basically a push type game. The over/under is 50.5. Texas A&M's defense, it has been really good. They're only averaging 8.6, allowing 8.6 points a game right now. Arkansas has won 3 higher scoring games themselves against Cincinnati, South Carolina, and Missouri State. All 3 teams, though, all 3 of those teams, the way they moved the ball against the Hogs was through the air. 325 yards or more those 3 teams had against Arkansas. That's not going to be an issue with this A&M team because they can't throw the ball. Arkansas leads the nation with 17 sacks, and they're also 7th in the nation against the run. So I don't see A&M being able to score more very much, and I like Arkansas to win 20-16.
Nice. You're the stat man. You obviously put it out there pretty well. Now this is I think this. Let me see here. I think this is this a Jerry's World? Did I mess that up? I don't think this is it. College Station. Does that sound accurate to you?
Let me see if I can find that out here real quick.
You look for that. Because I have it written in two different ways on my sheet here. So maybe they're at Jerry's World, maybe they're not. But this has been just a confusing Texas A&M team.
I mean, it would make sense since Jerry Jones went to Arkansas and all that.
Yeah, good call. So, yeah, no, that's a good call.
I'm looking though.
The Aggies offense is, frankly, it's still a mystery, even though they had a new starting quarterback last week and all of those different things. And what Arkansas really does best is throw the ball. And as good as A&M's defense has been, they're not really good against the pass. And so I think that is what is going to do them in at the end of the day. And I don't think this game is going to be all that close. And if it is at Jerry's World, he's going to enjoy himself, because I think Arkansas blows this one wide open. I think they win 35-14.
Yeah, I could see that as well. And I'm still efforting to find out where this game is taking place. Yeah, it is. AT&T Stadium. You're right.
You're right. So
I messed up on that. You're right.
That's okay. I said.
I think it's technically an A&M home game, but they're playing at Jerry's World. You're right.
Right. Yep. So, yeah, I think this one's going to be a party for Jerry. That's what I think is going to happen.
Right.
So we have one more game on the docket here, Sean. We've got Wisconsin at Ohio State. I believe unranked Wisconsin. They traveled to Columbus in the Horseshoe to take on number 3 Ohio State. And this game is also a night game. It's set to kick off at 7:30 on ABC.
Yeah, and Ohio State's favored by nearly 3 touchdowns in this game. And and like Stymie just said, Ohio State might end up winning by 30. Ohio State's gone on to pound Arkansas State and Toledo the last 2 weeks by a combined 122-33. And CJ Stroud, 6 touchdowns and no interceptions.
Well, I think Sean might be frozen here, so I will go ahead and give my prediction for this game. Look, the Buckeyes are favored pretty highly to take this one in the Big Ten opener for both teams. The fact that it's a home game for Ohio State also increases the odds. They're going to take this one by a pretty wide margin, I think. And, I've tried to look at this from every angle and see a route for Wisconsin to win this game, and I'm just not seeing the path. I think the odds makers have it at about a 17-point spread, and I think it should be higher than that. So, I think this one's over at halftime, to be honest with you, and I think Ohio State's offense is going to have a day against this Badger defense. I think, Wisconsin, they'll put some points on the board, maybe late, just to make it interesting. But I've got Ohio State winning 42-10, which I think is. Well, I mean, Stymie said it was going to be a 30-point game, and I think that that's definitely a possibility. I've got them winning by 32, right? So 42-10. I don't even think it's going to be all that close, if I'm being honest. So Ohio State's going to roll. I'm not, we talked about this one because I think it might be the most intriguing, Big Ten game of the weekend. But at the same time, this is not going to be a game. Ohio State's going to roll all over Wisconsin, and that's going to do it. So it doesn't look like Sean is going to return, and that is totally fine because I can take us out of here just fine. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this edition of Countdown to Kickoff. Please join us in 2 weeks, I do believe, because that is when Notre Dame will play again from the glittering lights of Las Vegas as they take on BYU. But make sure you tune in today, of course, at 3:30 for this Notre Dame, North Carolina football game. It should be a good one. Hopefully the scoreboard is lit up, but not too much. And at the end of the day, Notre Dame is victorious. So we will see what happens. But everybody, thank you for joining us. We had a really good time. I know Sean had a good time. This was one of our favorite shows of the week to do. And thank you guys all for joining us. Make sure you hit that notification bell. Make sure that you subscribe, tell your friends, all of those fun things. and hit that notification bell because right around 8 o'clock, we'll have our post-game show, and hopefully we've all got smiles on our faces. So everybody, I hope you have a wonderful day of enjoying some college football. Go Irish.